Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Some hemp news we'll start off with. Then we have an interview with Erick Andrade in Michoacan, Mexico, longtime cannabis activist, and we've met him judging the Jalisco Cannabis Cup down in Guadalajara, so he'll be our guest tonight. Our hemp news segment starts in just a moment, but first, as we always do, we'll bring out our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, our first hemp news story tonight is out of Washington, D.C. Oregon's own Congressman Earl Blumenauer and Representative Jared Huffman just on Wednesday filed a bill in Washington, D.C. to help small-scale cannabis cultivators compete with larger industry players by shipping and selling products directly to consumers across state lines. The Small and Homestead Independent Producers, or SHIP Act, seeks to address concerns that when the federal prohibition of cannabis finally comes to an end, the industry could easily, and to the detriment of small business owners, be consolidated under the multi-state operators which already dominate many of the state markets. But giving small-scale operators the ability to operate on a direct-to-consumer model could help small growers save money on distribution costs or working directly with retailers. The bill would take effect following the plant's eventual federal legalization. The bill states that, quote, a small cultivator of marijuana and a small manufacturer of marijuana products may ship and sell marijuana or marijuana products to an individual located in that state or another state in which possession of marijuana or marijuana products is lawful by that individual using the Postal Service or any private or commercial interstate carrier, end quote. According to the report, small cultivators are considered in the bill to be operators with up to 1 acre of outdoor cannabis canopy and up to 22,000 square feet of greenhouse cannabis canopy, or up to 5,000 square feet of indoor cannabis canopy. Small-scale manufacturers, meanwhile, are defined as those producing manufactured cannabis products such as salves, tinctures, edibles, or concentrates, but which have gross annual revenue of less than $5 million. In a court case, a circuit court judge on Friday dismissed a legal challenge that sought to remove a marijuana legalization question from Missouri's November ballot. The judge determined that the plaintiff in the suit, who works for Virginia-based Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, did not have standing to challenge the Missouri initiative because she failed to provide sufficient evidence of residency. Further, the judge also opined that the plaintiff's challenge lacked merit, finding that all the measure's provisions related to regulating cannabis, and therefore it did not violate the state's single subject rule requirement. He also determined that the Secretary of State's office acted properly when it counted and validated the signatures provided by the campaign's proponents. Legal Missouri 2022. In recent years, legalization opponents have frequently turned to legal challenges in their effort to either overturn election results or to prevent voters from deciding on marijuana legalization questions. With public support for marijuana policy reform reaching supermajority status in recent years, prohibitionists and other political opponents have largely abandoned efforts to try and influence public opinion. Rather, they are now relying on gamesmanship to prevent voters from weighing in on the issue at all. In some cases, they're even willing to overturn the will of the electorate to get their way. Whether or not one personally supports or opposes cannabis legalization, These cynical and undemocratic tactics ought to be a cause of deep concern. Missouri's proposed measure would allow adults to possess up to 3 ounces, to purchase from licensed retailers, and to home cultivate up to 6 flowering plants and 6 immature plants, and 6 clones. Limited quantities of cannabis would also be allowed. It also establishes a program to automatically review and expunge those with criminal records for nonviolent marijuana-related marijuana offenses, among other changes in the law. Voters in Maryland, North Dakota, and South Dakota will be deciding on adult use legalization initiatives on Election Day as well. Proponents of the Arkansas initiative to legalize the adult use marijuana market are engaged in a legal appeal before the state Supreme Court after election officials rejected their proposed ballot title. In Oklahoma, election officials recently verified that proponents gathered the necessary signatures to qualify their legalization proposal, but have also warned that delays in the verification process may jeopardize its inclusion on the 2022 ballot. In addition to these statewide efforts, voters in dozens of cities will be deciding on municipal ballot questions this fall. For instance, voters in 5 Texas cities will decide on measures seeking to amend local laws curtailing police officers' authority to issue citations or make arrests for Class A or Class B misdemeanor possession of marijuana offenses, absent a defendant's alleged involvement in a felony-level narcotics case. Voters in several Ohio cities will also decide on municipal measures depenalizing activities involving marijuana possession. In Rhode Island, voters in 31 towns will decide on measures determining whether or not to allow licensed cannabis retailers in their city. Voters in cities in several other states, including Colorado, Michigan, and Montana, will decide on similar local ballot measures as well. The next story is out of California. Cannabis legalization negatively impacts stock market returns for pharmaceutical companies, according to data published in the journal PLOS One. Researchers affiliated with California Polytechnic State University assessed whether the passage of statewide legalization laws influenced pharmaceutical firms' stock market returns. The authors reported that legalization is correlated with lower returns. They said, quote, returns decreased in response to both medical and recreational legalization for both generic and brand drug makers, end quote, they reported. Quote, investigators anticipate a single legalization event to reduce drug makers' annual sales by $3 billion on average. They concluded, quote, legal cannabis pressures competitive pressures to both generic and brand drug markets across both classes of drug makers. We predict that if the remaining states without medical legalization were to legalize cannabis, spending on conventional pharmaceutical drugs would decrease by almost 11%. The size of the response we see suggests that investors expect a large substitution away from conventional pharmaceuticals. The market's recognition of cannabis as an alternative to conventional medications documented here underscores the need for additional research into the medical potential of cannabis and suggests that cannabis might be a useful tool for increasing competition in the U.S. drug market, end quote. Prior studies have consistently shown that those with access to cannabis products typically reduce or eliminate their consumption of pharmaceutical drugs over time, particularly with respect to the use of opioids, benzodiazepines, anxiolytics, and sleep aids. Specifically, data published earlier this year in the journal Health Economics identified, quote, significant reductions in the volume of prescriptions within a drug classes that align with the medical indications for pain, depression, anxiety, sleep, psychosis, and seizures, end quote, in states that had enacted adult use cannabis legalization. Prior ecological studies have similarly identified an association between the adoption of medical cannabis access law and the reduced Medicaid prescription drug spending. The full text of this study, U.S. cannabis laws projected to cost generic and brand pharmaceutical firms billions, appears in this month's edition of PLOS One. Our last story tonight is from Pennsylvania. Mice injected with the cannabinoid CBG, or cannabigerol, experienced a significant decrease in blood pressure, according to clinical data published in the journal Frontiers in Physiology. A team of researchers with Penn State College of Medicine assessed the cardiovascular impact of CBG compared to placebo in healthy mice. Animals in the study were injected in the abdomen with either CBG or a saline solution. The authors reported, quote, acute CBG administration elicits a significant decrease in blood pressure in phenotypically normal male mice without altering heart rate or locomotor activity, end quote. The authors concluded, quote, the present study provides new mechanistic insight into the cardiovascular effects of CBG in the context of normal blood pressure. Overall, these findings add to the growing literature regarding the role of cannabinoids in blood pressure regulation, end quote. A 2017 clinical trial previously documented the ability of oral doses of CBD, or cannabidiol, to lower blood pressure in healthy volunteers, while a 2021 observational trial identified a link between long-term cannabis use and a reduction in systolic and diastolic blood pressure in elderly subjects. This study, acute cannabidiol administration lowers blood pressure in mice, appears in this month's edition of Frontiers in Physiology. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. I want to remind you, if you are a loved one or looking for a doctor who can help you obtain a medical marijuana permit in your state, give us a call. Our number at THCF is 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Now we're going into our interview with Erick Andrade. He is an activist in Michoacan in Mexico. And I hope you enjoy the interview and keep helping restore hemp. Good night. I would like to introduce Erick, who lives in Mexico, and recently was on a podcast, and he did another show for us a few months back, and I figured let's interview you. So welcome to the show, Erick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanford. I'm very, very happy and honored to be on your show. Thank you.
Hey, well, it's good to have you on again. This time you're not just translating someone else. First of all, I understand that you came and worked in Washington State. So
Yes.
I am in Oregon, which is, there's a river between us and Washington State here in Portland. And so tell us how that came about.
It was pretty cool. I went to the United States a couple of years back, trying to look for work, and then I immigrated. I was in Chicago. I was in the Chicago area, and I took the Amtrak all the way down to Washington State. I ended up in a small town called Quincy in Washington, which is like 45 minutes away from Wenatchee, probably an hour away from Ephrata. Started working there, worked at a grocery shop. You know, I was at the cash register. I was ringing up stuff. And then one day a guy walked in and he smelled gassy, like really, really gassy. So I asked him, I was like, yo, you smell really good, bro. Where can I get some of that? And he handed me, a little card. And he's like, you like weed? I was like, dude, I love weed. Like, come down. So I went down to the grow spot. I had no experience, so they hired me as I was doing the dirty work. I was sweeping. But I was trying to learn. So that was my introduction to cannabis in the United States. I had already lived in the United States, but I had never experienced legal cannabis because I was too young. I was in Chicago. I came back when I was 15, which was about 16, 17 years ago. So legal cannabis wasn't even imagined in my area. So that was my introduction into buying legal cannabis, into smoking legal cannabis, and working with legal cannabis.
I see. Yeah, now it is legal in Illinois. Illinois was one of the Midwestern states, but it's very expensive in Illinois through their shops, probably about 5 times more than it is here in Oregon. But how did you become involved with the cannabis movement in Mexico?
So when I came back down to Mexico from Washington, I started working with my wife at her dance academy. She has an academy. She teaches a whole bunch of disciplines, aerial silks, hoop, trapeze, etc. and I was helping her out there because I had no job. So we started working with what we had, with what was our own.
Are you a good dancer?
I'm not. No. I was a receptionist. I was public relations. I did not dance. My wife does all the dancing and the teaching in that area.
Well, she must have taught you a few moves anyway.
I mean, hopefully.
Right.
So I was on Facebook one day and I saw an ad for a cannabis workshop in Guadalajara, which is about a 3-hour drive from my city. So I talked to my wife, my fiance at the time, and I was like, "Yo, this is interesting. This is stuff, you know, that I want to learn about. I want to continue learning about." So I emailed them. I asked them for info. They gave me the info. It was really cheap. It was really close. So we decided to go. And when we got there, it completely, you know, our expectations were just blown out of the water. The camaraderie, you know, the workshops that they had workshops about growing outdoor, indoor extractions. You know, they gave out SOPs and stuff, which really caught my eye, because there's a lot of people that don't know these types of, you know, different strategies and terms and things of how to, you know, things you can put into your cannabis grower extracting and stuff. So I was really amazed. And when I talked to my wife, she was like, "Why don't you do the same thing in our state? Offer the information, get people to come down from different states to give workshops." And that's how I started out into cannabis and cannabis activism down here in Mexico.
So the folks in Guadalajara, is that the 420 Guadalajara people, Cici and Carlos Cervantes and Isaac?
Yes. Well, the workshop that I went to was co-organized by 420 Guadalajara, 420 Guadalajara. It was organized as well by uh, um, a group of activists that were called Hemp House Growers. They've changed their name, but to organize the workshop, and 420 Guadalajara, which was involved, which helped them reach and gain more engagement with people, because 420 Guadalajara had already done a couple of workshops beforehand. But this one was the one that united a lot of activists that are still active today.
I see. So that was what, about 7 years ago, you said?
Yeah, that was about 7 years ago.
Okay. And so since then, we've met at the Jalisco Copa. And you want to tell our audience what that is?
Sure. The Jalisco Cannabis Cup, JCC for short, is one of the first cannabis cups to operate, to be functional in Mexico. It's going on its 4th year this year. It's a cup that, you know, just like in the different categories, they judge flowers, indoor, outdoor. They separate them in subcategories as like indicas, sativas, etc. They do extracts, everything that, you know, includes competing and showing off your product, be it flower, be it edibles, be it an extract, a tincture, CBD drops, anything you want. So it's the opportunity for people that are trying to, you know, hand out products or trying to put out products into the market. It's a way for them to get constructive criticism from people that know their stuff. So we fill out a whole bunch of we fill out a whole bunch of, you know, forms. We see where it's lacking quality or where it has quality, and we try to write, you know, constructive criticism on the back. So when it's handed to them, they can get that constructive criticism and try to, you know, up their game next year. And we've seen a lot of people that, you know, get probably 3rd place one year, and then the next year they win 1st. So that's what the cups are about here in Mexico.
How many Jalisco Cups have you judged?
I've judged 2 Jalisco Cups, and then the last cup participated as the judge coordinator. So what my job was pre-filtering the flower. You know, set it up in a way that it could be judgeable. We don't want to give out, you know, indica dominance all first, because then the judges are going to be way too tired to try the sativa. So what I try to do is I try to generate this effect where it's nice to smoke a whole bunch of cannabis, And for example, we started off with edibles last year. So it was my job to do a couple of THC edibles and then a couple of only CBD edibles so that the effect was manageable. That was my job. But I've participated in all of them. I'm going to be a judge in this next one in November as well.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you there. I do know that in the edibles judging, a few people ate too much, I think, and so they got a little bit too high. I was careful. I ate maybe a third of the first one, and then I just took little tastes after that, realizing that it's hard to adjust your dosage with edibles. You've got to know, and I know, but some people got a little bit too high during that segment.
Oh, definitely. We had a couple of deserters. We had people that didn't finish judging. We started off with like the first Jalisco Cup. We started with like, I don't know, it was the second one with like 16 judges. And then 9 of them probably finished eating all of the edibles. I think, you know, being a judge is really romanticized. You have to know what you're doing. You're not going to eat the whole edible. You have to taste it. We're tasting things.
It's like a wine judge. You don't drink
Exactly.
the bottle. You know, you just sample it and then clear your palate. I know there was some coffee out there to kind of clear the palate so we could tell the difference in the
Yes,
various.
it's very important. We're also trying to give it that turn. We're trying to teach people how to taste properly, how to interpret terms in the right way. You know, you can smell a plant and almost get a sense of how it's gonna affect your body by the place the terpenes hit your nose. So too. Um, we've taken courses. We try to educate ourselves so that when we're at the judges table, we get to work, and we try to teach everybody that might not have the same knowledge that we have how to do it the proper way, because we take science and we back it. You've seen us. We take out the microscopes. We look at the trichomes. We look at if there's any bug exoskeleton, feces, or any undesirables, and that's what's important. Exactly. That's important. We want Mexico to be ready for the cannabis when cannabis legalization is ready, and when there's an actual, enterprise, when there's people with businesses functioning. We want people to be ready and have those, standards of quality that will be able to get them on the market easier, and for them not to struggle and have a mid-quality product.
You want to tell our audience what the status of cannabis legalization is in Mexico? I know I've covered it on past shows, but I think it's fascinating how the Mexican Supreme Court ordered the legislature to legalize cannabis based on human rights, which I think is a big step forward, and that Mexico leads the way in that, and said that, people have a right to develop their personality, I believe. And how has that affected, and how has that been, the movement been disappointed in the Supreme?
It's at a standby right now. It's completely halted. They're still talking about it, but it's not. The president's been really clear about it lately. It's not at it's not on his priority list to legalize cannabis. Which thing he told us completely different at the beginning. I think this guy won because he got he got us to empathize with him. So now it's
Obrador, the
yes,
president.
exactly. Andres Manuel López Obrador. So he's a leftist, and since the left won, they started trying to, propose all of these things. One of these things was cannabis legalization, and we as activists, we have a saying that's rights before market. So we're trying to get our government to recognize our rights at least before they open up the market. And we have these big companies already coming in trying to get licensing to distribute products which aren't Mexican or made from Mexican hemp. So it went to the legislator, and then the House of what was it? It was the legislators. They dropped it down to the deputies, and they discussed it, and they proposed a couple of different plans. where they include how much you can possess, how you're going to be able to pretty much consume. But it's been at a standby. There hasn't been any news. They haven't really talked about it. I think that cannabis is, unfortunately, it's being lowered in terms of priority because of the whole, the amount of violence that we have in Mexico. So the priority is just, keeping people safe and these criminal organizations out of the cities, and not cannabis. So right now it's at a complete standby. We don't know what it's gonna, what turn it's gonna take. What we're doing right now is we're getting people to get permits, so you can ask the government for a permit. It's a pretty long process, but they end up giving you a permit, which is a permission for you to possess, grow, harvest, import seeds, etc.
So is that based on medical use, or is that take into account adult use?
That's taken into account as strictly adult use. So it's completely recreational. It doesn't include medicinal, but it's included, in a sort of way, because it doesn't stipulate numbers. So it doesn't say how much you can possess. It doesn't say how many plants you can have at your house. It doesn't say how much you can grow. It doesn't say how many seeds you can import. So what we're doing right now as activists is we're getting lawyers and we're getting a whole bunch of people their permits on the cheap, so they can exploit these permits and have 1,000 plants if they want to, because that's going to make the government ask a whole bunch of questions. Wait, so we haven't legalized, but there's 50,000 people growing over 1,000 plants of cannabis at their house. We need to do something about this. We need to turn the eye this way.
So the status right now is still nebulous. The legislature, in order to legalize marijuana, and I think the House of Deputies passed something that the activists didn't like, and the Senate didn't take. Then the Senate passed something that, again, activists didn't like. It's really these Canadian cannabis companies that, I don't know if you know about how they ripped me off, but they've gone everywhere around to try to dominate the cannabis industry. I see them in Colombia. I see them in Mexico. I see them in every state in the United States. And I've been a victim of their malign intent in terms of having them steal everything from me in my life based on forgeries and paying off judges here in the United States. Americans often talk about how corrupt other countries are, but America is just as corrupt, if not more so. And most Americans just don't have to deal with it that often. But these same Canadian cannabis companies, namely Kronos in particular, they're the ones who their board of directors took everything in my life from me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not mistaken,
until they came in with forgeries and bought the judge. Later, here the prosecutor of my home county, Multnomah County in Oregon, actually said this judge was corrupt and they weren't going to put any more cases in front of her. So she retired and now works for the law firm that stole everything from me, that the Canadians hired. But we see it internationally.
I think it's curious that you mentioned Kronos, because I think they were the first. This was in the news a couple of weeks ago. I think they have a license to distribute CBD legally in Mexico, which is, I think they are the first international company to have that permission, which is kind of crazy. You know how they give foreign countries access to a legal market that doesn't exist yet before the natives, the people that could actually benefit from cannabis. And it's also conflict of interest. One of our ex-presidents, Vicente Fox, was announced president of Chiron, which is another Canadian CBD company. So it's, as a Mexican, why would you try to give access? We see it also in mining. A lot of Mexican soil has been completely milked by Canadian mining companies. So
the same people who are in charge of the Canadian mining companies are the ones who started this Kronos Group and these other Canadian companies. It's exactly the same
It
people.
goes full circle.
Yeah, yeah. They've exploited the world's resources in terms of metals and minerals, and now they're trying to control the world's cannabis crop before it even becomes legal. Well, hopefully we can do something to stop that.
Hopefully we can. I think educating people is the way to try to get them to act out in a good way, because that's what we're about. I think activism is just acting out, but trying to do it in a peaceful manner, not trying to disrupt other people's lives, but try to get the government to look at you and, recognize your rights as a human.
Mhm. And that's what I really liked about the Mexican Supreme Court's ruling. I know they require 5 different rulings before they made it an order to the legislature. And that's been about 3 years, hasn't it? 3 years ago that
Yes.
they ordered the legislature to legally regulate cannabis, but it hasn't happened yet. And then last year, what did they do? Did they come up with another order saying, "Well, you haven't done it, and so now this"?
So it's crazy because they actually turned an eye to cannabis because of people trying to get their permits. So 5 people were granted their permits, and that was taken into consideration. And they were like, okay, so 5 people have their permits. It's like a loophole in Mexican rights, where if 5 people fight for the same thing and the Mexican government gives them the permit, now it's called jurisprudencia, which is in sense a way of not decriminalization, but a way of looking at the permits and giving more out, because the Mexican government understands what the permits are. So they passed these permits and they started working on these laws, which were passed back and forth from the legislators to the deputies and vice versa, the Senate, etc., to the activists. And they basically understood that they have every human being has a right to manifest or to evolve their personality in any way they want. So it's a freedom, not of speech, but a freedom of personality, which includes what you consume. So what we're fighting for is that freedom. I express my personality in this way, which includes cannabis. We're trying to fight this in the for the recreational route, because in 2017, supposedly medicinal cannabis was legalized. But it's a giant root of paperwork that you have to go through to get the permits and stuff, and it's not accessible for people that don't have the money, which is what we're trying to fight for as well. There's people that can access legal cannabis, but to access legal cannabis, you have to put up the money to be able to access legal cannabis. So a regular Joe that's earning minimum wage in Mexico, which is it's a joke, really. They can barely afford to provide for their family. How can they access legal cannabis? So it's at a standby. Like I said last year, they put it in, they called it the cooler. They put it in the cooler because it wasn't important. They took it out of the cooler, and they started discussing it again. They've passed around a whole bunch of options for what's the best for decriminalization. They've talked about an ounce of possession. They've talked about 200 grams of possession. They've talked about a whole bunch of different things that could benefit but also harm, because it's basically you telling the government what you're doing, and a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah, we see that here too. So it's been taken out of the cooler in terms of the legalization proposal in Mexico. Is there any path forward? Is there anything happening now, or is it thrown back in the cooler again?
It's They took it out of the cooler. It's remained out of the cooler, and basically it's just I think it's just people talking about cannabis. They're not really discussing anything. They're not really taking any decisions. I have, it's probably one of my conspiracy theories, but I think that Lopez Obrador is going to finish his term without doing anything in terms of cannabis. And we're going to have to wait to see if somebody from the same party comes up and continues what he was doing, which is what he's trying to do, because he has
his party, which is Morena, has complete control of the Senate and of the deputies. So it really all depends on him and his party. I think he's probably going to finish his term without us seeing any advance, and it depends on who comes up. Because if we a really conservative party coming up, they're probably just going to push it aside and say, you know what, we don't care about this. This isn't on our list of priorities, so we're just going to put it back in the cooler. As of right now, they took it out of the cooler, like I said, but they're getting paid to talk. They really haven't decided on anything, and the future is we don't know. It's uncertain. We don't know where it's going to go. So what we're doing right now is trying to get people to push for these permits so that they can have legal access to cannabis.
I see. Well, I didn't say this a while ago, but the Kronos Group got a $1.8 billion investment from Altria Group, which are the owners of Marlboro Tobacco.
Wow.
So I think probably these large companies are saying, no, don't pass this. Waiting till they get the right set of bribes in place to take over the industry in Mexico as well.
Well,
I think that's what's going on.
It's crazy because a couple of months ago, vaping was criminalized in Mexico. And vaping was criminalized because Philip Morris wanted to go into the vape market, but their device was a complete bomb. Like, they bombed. It was a failure. So they took it out of the market. And now what they're trying to do is, it's like, if I unplug my TV and I take it home with me if we're watching a game, it's like, okay, so I'm not going to be able to play, then you guys can't play with my ball. So they, criminalized vaping. And I think since Philip Morris, like you said, if they're investing in cannabis, obviously they're going to want to have an upper hand in the game. So obviously they're going to wait until everything is right so they can legalize. Because look at a state like a country like Thailand. I think Thailand a couple of years ago, if you were caught with cannabis, it was a pretty weird situation. Like, you didn't know what was going to happen to you because they had really strict laws on drugs over in Thailand, and right now it's decriminalized.
Right, and the government, in fact, has given away 1 million cannabis plants in Thailand.
Wow, we should look at countries like that to see where we can evolve. There's lots of talk in Mexico. How can we legislate cannabis? Like, what way can we move? Should we move in the way of the U.S.? Should we move in the way of Colombia? Should we move in the way of the Netherlands, Canada? What can we do? But it's not. I think it's very specific to Mexico. You have to legislate for Mexico because Mexico is dealing with a whole bunch of things that other countries aren't dealing with. One of them being organized crime. You have to take into consideration that these guys are going to want to cut in the game. They're going to want to participate. And making them able to participate is also beneficial for the state because they're going to be able to tax. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious to us, but we just have to get the Mexican government to see it through our eyes, which they really can't.
So let's talk a little bit about organized crime. We often hear about the cartels and how they control various aspects of illegal drugs and illegal migration. Is that a danger in your community? I know that a lot of people are killed in Mexico by organized criminals.
Yeah, it is. It's something that we have to live with on the daily. I think, especially where I live in a region of Michoacan that's probably one of the most violent regions. We were actually, I think this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the #1 most violent city in the world where I live. So per capita, I live in a city with less than 500,000 people, and we have, per capita more violence than Chicago, which has millions of people. So yeah, definitely, organized crime is a part of life down here, whether you want it or not. I have a business, I have a head shop, I have to be constantly on the lookout for these types of people, but they also consume. So we can't. It's kind of crazy because as a cannabis activist, you try to give out knowledge, but then you have to also take into consideration you can't filter that knowledge. You can't say this knowledge goes out to you, but not to you. It has to go out in general, and it's not, you know, up to you on how the people that receive the knowledge use it. So, you know, it's life down here. I think we have, you know, two governments. It's the Mexican government and the cartel. Because if the Mexican government doesn't take care of it, then the cartel is going to act. Unfortunately, that's how it is. It's a violence that's very different from violence like in the States. You know, in the States, you have gang violence. I grew up in Chicago. We had a whole bunch of gangs, and the violence was completely different. And down here, it's if you're a dealer, if you're trying to deal a couple of ounces to your buddies and stuff, you can get into a lot of trouble if you get caught, because you could end up, you know, without a life. They're not just gonna, you know, slap you a couple of times. They're probably gonna take your life. So it's crazy being an activist down here with all this, you know, cartel.
Sounds very frightening. I mean, I've been an activist. I had to deal with police violence and police infiltration and those kinds of things, but I didn't have to worry about the mafia coming and killing me. So
yeah, here, I mean, if the Mexican government comes after you, you know, you could probably fix it with money. You know, there's a way around things. But if the mafia comes for you, they're not going to want money because they have money.
right. Well, I noticed flying into Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta that the police keep or the border guards have an ATM back inside the immigration area that they can make people go in and give them bribes from the ATM. I've never seen anything like that before. You know, why else would they have an ATM in the immigration area if it wasn't to give the people there bribes? A friend of mine came down with us to the last Jalisco Cannabis Cup, and she got caught with a couple of joints, and they demanded money and made her go to the ATM to get money out for them. And I just thought, you know, it's supposed to be legal now. And the thing is, they didn't take her cannabis or anything. They let her keep all that once they had the money.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's they don't call it a bribe. They call it a fine. You just pay it immediately. So they fine you, and then you go take out the money and you pay the fine, but there's no receipt. There's no way to prove that you actually paid the fine or that you were detained, or it's crazy. You know, like you said, every country's corrupt. It's just Mexico is very blatant about corruption. They don't care.
It's honest corruption, in other words.
If you can call it that, yeah, it's honest corruption. You know, if you get pulled over, all you have to do is break out a 20 and give it to the cop. You don't waste your time, which is, I mean, it shouldn't be happening because we're all contributing to corruption. So we're all, you know, making it stay, but it's colluded in our society as well.
Right, right. And how can you change something like that? I mean, it's a long-term change, I guess, legalizing cannabis, but obviously that's on hold there, even though your own Supreme Court has ordered that it be legalized. For some reason, the legislature and the president isn't behind it either. Question, of course, is if the Senate and the House of Deputies pass the legalization law, could Lopez Obrador stop it? Would he veto it, or
he could?
He could.
He could. He has the final say. If something, you know, if something is going to come out that he doesn't like, he can absolutely veto it. They've done a whole bunch of inconstitutional things, like they've postponed this bill for 3 times now, which is 3 times more than the Constitution says you can do it. So they've laughed in our face because we've said, well, you can't do it anymore. It's unconstitutional. And they just look at you and they say, wait, we are the Constitution. So, you know, it's nobody's respecting our rights. Nobody's respecting what the Constitution is actually saying. And if we're getting that from our government, what can we expect once it is legal? So I don't know, we're at a standoff right now with the Mexican government. You know, we're trying to get it legalized. for everybody. We don't want people to be, because of corruption, because you can get pulled over. And if you have, so right now it's legal, to carry up to 5 grams. But if you have 3 grams, and if you weigh those 3 grams with that little baggie that weighs 1 gram, that's 4 grams. And even though it's legal, it's considered legal, if you get pulled over, the cop can plant another gram on you or another 2 grams on you because it's based on numbers. So they can exceed that number and they can still fine you, which is like what we said, a fine that you pay exactly at that same moment.
To the cop.
Exactly.
In his pocket, not into the public coffer.
Exactly. So that's what we're trying to tell the Mexican government. Like, yo, there's corruption. You have to see it. And we're discriminated in a sense that, we're pulled over because you look like a stoner. You get, if you're walking, you can be approached by a police officer and he can just go through your belongings because he's the law and because you look like a stoner, because they profile you. So we're trying to get the Mexican government to say, we can't, have these profilings continue. We have to get the cops to not look for cannabis. And if the cannabis is attached to a number, then the cop is just going to exceed that number and he's going to try to get money out of you. So what we're trying to push for, which is going to be really difficult for them to pass, is no amounts in possession. So if you're walking around with a kilo, you could walk around with a kilo and not be asked about it because, it's legal. It's decriminalized. There's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. We want this to be legal, like alcohol. They don't ask if you're going to drink the whole 6-pack yourself. They don't limit to how many beers you can go out and buy at an Oxxo or at a Walmart. You could just buy 50, 24 packs and nobody says anything. And you could buy 100 Snicker bars and nobody says anything. Why not be able to buy 100 ounces?
Yeah. And, I don't know. Most people aren't going to consume a kilo right away. I'm not sure what the limit should be, or if there shouldn't be a limit. I mean, this is stuff that grows on trees, really. And
exactly.
So tell us about your store. Do you have to deal with the police and the organized crime in running a smoke shop there in Michoacan, in the most dangerous city perhaps in Mexico? Or can you talk?
You know what? Yeah, of course I can. Okay. No, I have no problem. I'm a lot of people already know me in my city. I'm the weed guy in my city because
I can relate.
I've gone out.
I can relate to that.
Exactly. So I'm the weed guy. So a lot of people, it's cool because I made my shop not just a place where you go and you buy a pipe or you go and you buy some blunts or some papers. It's a place where you go and you get educated. So a lot of people stop by, they ask me questions, they bring down their flower. I have a microscope there. So we check out the trichomes. I educate them on, what they can do better and stuff. I give out free info for people. So I've dealt with police. The military's come into my store and they've asked me just bluntly, do you sell weed? And I laugh at their face. And that's when they know that I don't sell weed because I'm very blatant about that. Like if somebody asks me if I don't sell anything, it's illegal. I don't want to get involved with the government, and I'm not even involved with organized crime. The cartel members, unfortunately, there's like a whole bunch of organized crime cells here in my city. So there's about 3 to 4 different cartels. I think I probably sell product to all of them because they all consume wraps, they consume pre-rolls, so they can sell them out to the public, So it's also a way for them to come in the store and they can get educated as well. So that if they're going to be selling weed to the public, at least, let it be good quality weed and not this like pressed weed that everybody's used to. So it's, I have dealt with them. I haven't dealt with them in a negative way. I think we have that mutual respect where they understand what I'm trying to do, because all I'm trying to do is give out knowledge and have a spot where people can go and feel confident. I don't sell, there's a lot of places here in the city that sell, before I was installed in the city, before I opened my store, they sold blunts, they sold pipes, but they also sold crack pipes and meth pipes and, a whole bunch of other different types of paraphernalia that aren't 420 friendly. So I have an only 420 friendly shop. It's the only shop in my city. So I try to keep on a friendly basis with everybody because I'm very well. They know who I am. So
Right. What's the name of your shop?
La Uva.
And does that translate to anything?
La Uva is the grape. I called it the grape because my city, Uruapan, starts with a U. So as a slang term, we call it La Uva. It's like saying Chi-Town. So that's why it's La Uva Smoke Shop.
I see. So the grape smoke shop. It's like your town smoke
Yes.
shop. So do you have any plans in the upcoming? I know we're going to see each other here in November. I've already got my ticket to come there. Do you have any plans around the upcoming Jalisco Cannabis Cup?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna be there. Carlos Cervantes called me. He asked me if I wanted to judge. Of course, I wanted to judge. Uncle Stoner's coming down. We're gonna have a squash off. He asked me to be a judge there too. So I already have those plans. We're gonna have the cup is the 19th, November 19th and 20th. We're probably gonna be judging since the 14th. So pretty much all of November is booked for me. So those are the plans right now. Just going to the Jalisco Cup, trying to see the quality. Hopefully, it's way better than last year. Last year's quality kind of amazed me. So I'm very excited, very anxious to meet with you, your wife.
I've noticed the improvement year by year in the quality of the flower and the extracts, and I think the cup has something to do with that.
I think all of the cups have something to do with that because a lot of people now know that there are quality standards that you have to follow. And it's also translated, it's like diluted down into the black market because now Reggie is way better than it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago when I started smoking Reggie. So I can really see the up in the game, and I'm really glad that an activist like yourself can actually see the up in game too that Mexican growers are trying to make.
It's a lot of fun to come down there. I do enjoy it. I know it's going to be near the Volcan Tequila, and there's a wonderful round pyramid there, Guachimatones. I look forward to going back and seeing that I love those archaeological sites. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well,
So
you're in Mexico City, I think before, right?
yeah,
So from Mexico City, you could take a trip to Cholula, to Puebla, and there's a whole bunch of pyramids there too.
yeah. I went to Cholula and the Puebla.
Right, that's true. You were at the Cup. Yes.
I was at that one. I think that was the first one, and I think we'll see Luis back in Guadalajara as well. But I'm going to actually go to Expo Weed Mexico in October, so I do that one first. So I'll be back there in Mexico City. But Teotihuacan, of course, is magical. It's such a huge archaeological site. It's really unbelievable.
Very energetic.
Yeah. Cholula is more covered up. I mean, it's a big mountain in the middle of the city, but with a church on top. It's hidden. Unlike Teotihuacan, it's hidden under the dirt that they built that Catholic church on top of. It's the world's largest pyramid there in Cholula.
There's a lot of active archaeological digs right now in Cholula.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fascinating. I didn't get to spend much time around the pyramid. I was busy with the cup, but maybe someday. I don't know. There's tunnels that go down into it that look pretty small for somebody like me to go down into those tunnels.
Well, hopefully next year we organize a cup. You could come down. We have a whole bunch of archaeological sites in Michoacan too. So I would love for you to get to know my state, which is very beautiful as well, sir.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. I remember, of course, in my youth, Michoacan cannabis. When I first started using cannabis. I was just a kid in Texas. So, of course, all the first cannabis I had was uh, Mexican brickweed, really. And so it wasn't for several years before I started seeing Colombian cannabis, but Mexican cannabis is what got me started.
Well, hopefully, I mean, it's evolved. We don't see a lot of brickweed anymore, fortunately.
Yeah.
And Michoacan is very active in cannabis cultivation. The coast, the Michoacan coast, is amazing. They have, a plethora of different land races that they've been working on for generations, and they're making hash now. So they're making top quality hash, and it's awesome. It's awesome to be able to see and to, get to go down to these communities and see how they work with cannabis. There's a cannabis friendly town in Morelos, in a state in Mexico called Tetecala. They're self-proclaimed the first cannabis town in Mexico. They have a whole bunch of legal grows and stuff. Well, not legal, but they have a whole bunch of grows. They've adapted cannabis into their life. They are predominantly agricultural state. So they know that they can grow a whole bunch of hemp, and they're trying to go that way legally. They're trying to get the Mexican government to recognize them as the first legal state that, or town that has cannabis. So we want this to propagate everywhere. We just want people to get it's contagious. So we just want it to spread all over Mexico and have this knowledge free for everybody who wants to have this knowledge. It's on hand. Everybody has a smartphone, or at least 80% of people have smartphones. You're a click away from getting cannabis knowledge, and we try to keep knowledge precise and truthful.
Mhm. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience about the situation there in Mexico, or anything coming up?
No, I think we pretty much covered it all. Hopefully we see, not this year because it's September already. So when we have new laws, they usually write the bill in September so that in January it's official. It's already September. We haven't seen any advance. So hopefully next year we see something. If not, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. Keep doing these private events the way we're doing them. Keep participating in these private events like we do, and keep looking forward to meeting with people like you that have as much knowledge as you do.
All right. Well, I want to thank you. We've had Erick Andrade. Did I say it right? Erick Andrade. Sorry. But thanks for coming on again. It's good to have you as a guest. If someone wants to find your podcast, where would they go?
All right. So my podcast is on YouTube and it's on Spotify. Right now, it's predominantly Spanish speaking, but we have a couple of episodes coming out with OGs from the US, which are going to be English based. You can find them on Spotify or on YouTube. The podcast is called Matando Bacha, or you could just, put in the search tab La Uva Smoke Shop, and that's the best way.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Erick. Thanks for coming on, and keep working to restore hemp.
Yes, sir. We definitely will. Thank you very much. It was an honor to be on Cannabis Common Sense. And thank you, Mr. Sanford. I'll see you here in November.